Hello, everybody, and welcome to Inspirational Journeys again. My name is Ann Harrison, and today I have special guest Becca Wierwille. And she and I met, I met her through Patty Sheen's blog. So, yes, I'm going to give Patty Sheen, who is the host of the Step Into the Light podcast, and I met her through Write His Answer, and then Becca and I connected through Patty. And Patty writes children's books, but she also has a disability. And first of all, let me say welcome to the show, Becca.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Anne.
I thank you for being here. And so, why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers?
Yeah, so my name is Becca Wierwille. I am an author. I used to be a kindergarten teacher, and now I spend my days with my daughter, and I try to fit in writing during her nap times and in the mornings and evenings. So my debut middle grade novel, so for kids ages 8 to 12, is called Road Trip Rescue. It is the story about a girl and her road trip to find her long lost dog. And the protagonist in my story, her name is Kimmy. She was born missing half of her right arm, which is something that she and I share in common.
So, if you don't mind, before we get into the inspiration stuff, how do you write with one hand?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. And a lot of people ask me that. And the hard thing is, I don't know exactly how to explain it, but I type pretty quickly. So I do use both arms. So my right arm ends right below the elbow. So I do still have part of that arm and I have use of that arm. So I use my left hand to type on one side of the keyboard, and I use my right arm, my little arm as I call it, to kind of like pound keys on the other side. So I can't even tell you like which keys I touch which with hand. I know it's different. I used to have we had a keyboarding class in middle school, and I remember that being super frustrating because I'm like, well, I can't do it that way. But I have come up with my own way of doing it, and I type pretty quickly because as an author, it's helpful to be able to do that.
Oh yeah, it is. Um, so do you use like an ergonomic keyboard or any special type of keyboard?
Nope, I use my laptop, and I have used other keyboards in the past. I've never been using just a specific type of keyboard. I've been able to figure it out pretty much with whatever I'm using. And of course, whatever I'm I'm most comfortable with my laptop keyboard because that's what I use most often. And so I have it's kind of like muscle memory, and I can type without even really looking. But I can adjust to really whatever keyboard.
One more question about that. Is it difficult to touch type on your phone?
No, it's not. I use just one hand for my phone. So I just use my left hand to text, but I think I'm pretty quick at texting too. So what's interesting about, my arm, I've had people come up to me before if they break their arm or don't have use of an arm for some reason. And they'll say, well, now I know how you feel. It's so hard to do everything. And the reality is it's different. It's easier for me because I was born this way. And so since I was born with only use of one hand, I learned how to do everything with just one hand. So really, I just do things differently. It's not that it's necessarily difficult for me, if that makes sense.
Ah, and see, with me, the reason I say disability advocacy, other than light perception, I'm practically pretty much totally blind. So I use speech and braille and do all of that stuff. But I could not picture. And I tried to picture Kimmy, but honestly, and please don't take offense to this, but I could not imagine being blind and dealing and only having the use of one hand. That
Yeah. Well, and again, I think if you were born that way, if you'd always learned how to do things and that had just been the use that you had, I think
yeah.
that our bodies adjust in different ways. I always joke with people like, oh, if I woke up one morning and I had suddenly two arms, two hands, I don't know that I'd know what to do with my right hand because I'm so used to doing everything a certain way that arm I feel like would just be in the way a little bit, which I know I'd adjust, of course. But when you are used to a particular thing, it's different. And this was several years ago. I had an occupational therapist reach out to me. I think she was an occupational therapist or maybe physical therapist, but she reached out and she was doing this really cool research project where she was working on making kitchen appliances that were more accessible for people who didn't have use of a limb. And so she just asked if she could do a call with me and talk a lot about, what's hard for you to do in the kitchen. And we found through our conversation that a lot of the challenges that her patients had when they didn't have use of one limb were not as much of an issue for me because I had just adapted on my own. And so some of the things that the adaptive appliances she was creating, which are really neat, I wouldn't have necessarily used or needed in my own kitchen just because I have my own way of doing things already.
Wow, that's amazing. And it's interesting because to go back to the disability piece, me being totally blind, I can listen to fast speech because as you can glance down at your screen and speed read, if that's something you can do,
Mm-hmm.
I use my speech to do that. I'm not as fast at Braille as I am with the speech, but still it does help when
Yeah.
when you use it. But somebody who loses their sight later in life, they can't do that. It's harder for them for people to adjust to that. So
Mhm.
in essence, not in the same situation, but in essence, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting how our bodies and our minds adapt, and especially the differences if you are used to something your entire life and learn to do as a child as opposed to coming to it later in life.
Oh, yeah, right. So now on to the writing. How did you know when God called you to write?
Oh, that's such a good question. Well, first of all, I've always loved writing. And I think that in itself is because it's a gift that God has given me. It's a desire he's placed in my heart. So even before I knew how to write, I was coming up with stories. That was always when other kids would be playing games or doing other things, I'd be writing stories in my notebook and making up make believe islands and all sorts of creative things. So I always loved writing. And it wasn't until, and I'd always been writing stories. It wasn't until I got married, actually, that I started to write more seriously. And I think at that point, it was God kind of speaking to my heart and putting people in my life who were encouraging me in that direction. And
Hmm.
so I think he speaks to us through other people too. And then to come to writing for children specifically was definitely orchestrated by a lot of things that God put on my heart, stories that he was reminding me of that had really impacted me when I was younger. And then I had mentioned that I used to teach. So I used to teach kindergarten, and putting me around kids every day and also reading books all the time, excuse me, children's books really my voice is going away here, really got me interested in writing kidlit. And so I think all of those things God put on my heart, and I could feel him calling me to use those gifts that he has given me to write stories that show kids they are wonderfully created. And in the case of Road Trip Rescue, a message that I really want to communicate to kids is that they are never alone and they never have been.
Wow, I love that. Now, I signed up for your list and I read your two free short stories. Now, what is this? And I cannot even pronounce it. The the bread the dessert with
Yeah.
the plantains? Plantains?
Yeah. Rellenitos.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, that story is called Rellenitos with Rosa. And so,
yeah.
yeah, Rellenitos, they're this delicious dessert that is just, unlike anything I've ever had experienced before. But I had lived in Guatemala for a few months while I was in college. And then I'd gone back several times since because I really fell in love with the country and the culture. But this dessert, it on the outside, it's plantains, which are kind of like a banana, but a really big banana. It can taste like a potato, depending on how you cook it. It can taste sweeter, depending on how you cook it. But
Yeah.
this dessert is made of mashed plantain, and it's very sweet. And in the center, they have black beans. Sometimes there's mixed a little bit of cocoa in with it. So it's a delicious dessert, but it's very unique. And if you're coming into that culture without being aware of what it is, it can be a little bit like alarming. Like, okay, so this is a dessert made with black beans and bananas that are also kind of like potatoes.
Okay. Yeah, and I read that. I'm like, that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then go
I was
ahead.
going to say it's been a while since I wrote that short story, but I am currently working on the sequel to Road Trip Rescue. And in the sequel, they actually will be in Guatemala. And so Reyenitos come in again to the story in book 2. So I'm excited to be bringing those back in.
Oh wow, that is so cool. And I'm curious, are you gonna go write more with those characters? Rosa
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Well, not with those characters. Sorry. No, I don't have any immediate plans with those short stories. Like I said, those are written Oh goodness, a little while ago. I can't remember when I wrote them. I want to say it's been a couple of years. And honestly, I should revisit them and update them because it has been a while. But I don't have immediate plans with those characters. I do have immediate plans with the characters from my novel that just released. So I have more plans to have stories with those characters.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Because I know I read Runner Up too. And it was kind of sad that she ran away, but I'm telling you, honestly, I think the lady that was on the bus with her, to me, she was an angel because when she disappeared when the girl turned around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love writing characters into stories where you can tell, okay, there was something different about that character. Were they really like, was it an angel? Was it just characters that raise those kinds of questions and get the reader thinking about the ways that God can intervene in our daily lives without us necessarily at first noticing like, oh, that was God. But I love bringing in characters that get readers thinking about that.
Oh, that was so cool. So tell me about your process. Did you outline a road trip rescue or did
Yeah.
you um pants it?
Yeah, I used to be a bit of a pantser, but then once I started really getting more seriously into writing, I realized I had a problem. And my problem is that I would write a first chapter, a couple chapters, and then I would either get bored of that story and jump into another one, or I would lose focus and start thinking about something else. So that's when I really started learning about plotting. And now I love it. I wouldn't say I plot every single scene or every single chapter by any means, but what I really love, my favorite is Save the Cat writes a novel. So that's by Jessica Brody. So the Save the Cat story structure, those plot beats I really like. And so I can kind of have an idea, okay, here's where the story starts. Here is the inciting incident that's going to push us into action. And then, at the midpoint, I want this thing to happen that's really going to shift the way the story goes. And around this point, something really bad is going to happen that is going to push us into the final act. And so I have these ideas. And as I'm writing, I discover new things with the characters. The characters do things I might not always expect that take us in different directions. And so it develops and changes a lot through my process, which still keeps it alive and fun for me. But it helps me to have those little story beats to work toward, even if those story beats change a lot. So in the case of Road Trip Rescue, when I first started writing, and the premise of the book, and of course, I don't want to spoil it here because, what's the point of reading the book if you know the ending?
Exactly.
But the premise of Road Trip Rescue, she's going on this road trip to find her dog that's been missing for 2 years. And when I started writing the story, I did not know if she would find her dog at the end of the journey. I didn't know what that ending would look like. I knew where the ending would be. I had some idea of where it would fall and the different plot points that would kind of come into the story and feed into it up to that point. But I was really discovering along with Kimmy, along with the main character, as the story went on. And it also shaped a little bit through the revision. Well, I shouldn't say a little, a lot. It was reshaped a lot through the revision process too. So it's this fun mixture of being able to plot, because I like that, and then also being able to be surprised by the story as it happens.
Wow. Yeah, I like that. And I'm just picturing the dog at the let me stop because I will spoil it. I just had an image in my head.
Yeah, it's hard to talk about it without saying what happens.
I know, right? And it's like I can just picture this dog. Anyway,
yeah,
you got to read it to find out what I'm talking about because I can't. I just can't.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just talking to my aunt, and her granddaughter had read the story and actually skipped ahead to the ending because she couldn't wait to find out what happened to the dog. But she's still reading the story, but now she knows how it's going to end. I thought that was funny. I'm like, no, don't read this. Don't read the ending first.
No!
You got to find out what's going to happen.
Oh man! And the aunt in the book.
Yeah, Aunt Skylar.
Yeah, she kind of frustrated me at times. I will not. I'm not gonna lie to you.
I know she's frustrating. She's supposed to be a little bit frustrating, and I'm glad because Kimmy is definitely frustrated with her aunt. So I'm glad that came through to you as a reader too.
Oh yeah, I'm like, girl, you got a child with you. You need to act like it.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I love the contrast between Kimmy and Aunt Skylar. I think that added a lot of fun conflict to the trip. And also, and then this will change in book 2, but a lot of times in middle grade and other books for kids, you don't want the grown-ups to be too involved because you want the child to be the one pushing the action forward. And so by having a character, I mean, Kimmy needed an adult with her on this road trip. She's
Right.
12, so she couldn't be driving the car. But by having Aunt Skylar, who may not always make the best decisions, that was kind of a fun way to still have an adult, but still realize, okay, Kimmy really does have to be the one driving some of this action because Aunt Skylar is sometimes a little all over the place.
And then I thought, oh no, never mind. Yeah, it's like, oh no, she's doing this, and she's not, and she forgets it. Oh yeah, yeah. It was like, oh, silly woman. Anyway,
she was fun to write.
Oh, I bet she was. So, are you self-publishing, or do you have
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm independently publishing through my own. I created a publisher, Beloved Chronicles LLC. So that's my publisher name. And I'm also a freelance editor, and I've been doing that for a little while. And so it's been fun because I've been able to develop connections with other editors and other people in the industry. So when I came to the point where I had decided that this is what I wanted to do, I was like, okay, well, here are some editors I know I'd love to work with. And here's a cover designer who I love the covers he does. I'd love to work with him. So it was really fun to be able to build a team around myself of people who I wanted to help me put this book into the world, because I knew I would not be able to do it well on my own.
Right. And you just it took me in another direction. So I am actually in learning how to, because I feel like God is not only calling me to write, but to edit too. So I'm in that process of learning, to gaining experience. So let me pick your brain on the editing side.
Yeah.
How did you get started?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I have always had an eye for editing, and I think it comes from reading tons of books, because as much as I loved to write, I also loved to read. And then my first job out of college was actually as a newspaper reporter. And so a big part of my job there was editing. So when you're writing for a newspaper, you have to make sure your stories are really concise. You only have a certain amount of space. And then I was also helping the other writers, the other reporters with their work. And so I did that a lot. And during college, so even before that, I worked in the writing center, which is where other students could take their essays and stuff to get feedback. So people would always come to me, and it was just something that became a part of what I did. I was always pointing out typos. I'm the annoying person that way who's like, you don't need that period there, or you forgot to capitalize that letter. So I've always enjoyed it. And because I love reading so much, the idea of, reading someone's work, giving feedback, and getting paid to do that, that's a pretty ideal job. And so when I was teaching, I had a little bit of time, because that was before I was a mom. So I had a lot more time than I have now. And I had been part of different critique groups and just had been around people who had done editing for clients, and started asking questions, started getting into it. So I started really small by doing it for critique partners and people I'd known really well. And then I started to grow from there. One organization I'd really recommend is the Christian Pen. I don't know if you've heard of them.
I'm a member of that. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So the Christian Pen is definitely where I've met a lot of editors, asked a lot of questions. I've taken a course from the pen learning, the business side of things too.
Penn Institute.
Yes. Yeah. Penn Institute.
Yeah. I'm a bronze. I'm not a bronze. I'm a silver member.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, wow. So maybe I've seen you on the list.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not able to interact with the emails as much as I wish I could. I used to a little bit more. But if I am ever like editing a manuscript and have a question where I'm like, I'm just not sure how to communicate this to a client, or I just don't know. And even with my own work, I did it a little bit as I was doing the final proofread. I'm like, oh, I'd love to, pick the brains of dozens of editors. So sometimes I'll hop on the loop there and ask some questions.
I think I've seen some stuff, and I like the Monday's question, but I know one of the members was asking about a tough developmental edit, and I've done line edits and I've done developmentals, but I think I'm liking developmentals more, because even though I can do line edits, they're tedious, and with developmentals I can get a bigger picture.
Yeah.
Of the big picture edit and the story structure, because I love to read too. So that, and I'm working with Celebrate Lit Publishing, as working as one of their editors, and it's helping
Oh,
me learn.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you had gotten internships or.
No, I've only done freelance. And honestly, right now, my time is just so limited that I can't take on a ton of projects. So I limit myself to about one a month. But even that, like this month, since Road Trip Rescue launched in October, I was like, okay, I can't take a project in October. And with having a daughter now, I really only have my mom helps me with her a couple afternoons a week. And so those are my dedicated work afternoons. So I really have to be aware of the amount of things I have going on with my own writing, how much time I have to edit for clients, because I don't want to take on a project I'm not going to be able to give it my full attention.
Right. Right. I get that. So, any little tips or nuggets that you would like to share?
From the editing side or from the writing side?
Well, you can add, let's start with the editing side and then we can go from the writing side.
Yeah, well, for the editing side, I always recommend, so no matter how you're publishing, and especially this is true for self-published authors, because then you're not going through a traditional publisher who would give you an editor. It's so important to have someone else edit your work. I think a lot of us think, okay, well, and I'm, I'm an editor. That does not mean I edit my own work. I self-edit it and I revise it and I get it to be in the best place I can before I send it off to my editors. But I still hire a developmental editor. I still hire a line editor and I still hire a proofreader. And I think that is so important because I know I can't see the mistakes in my own writing. I really can't. And I can see some of it, but just I've been around the story for too long. I'm too close to it. So recognizing that it doesn't matter how good you are at grammar, how many stories you've read, and you might be the best editor ever, but still it's so important to hire someone else to get a second set of eyes on your work is so important.
Right.
So I would say that. And then also when you are revising yourself, I would say to still give it your all. I think a lot of writers, I shouldn't say a lot. I know some writers think, okay, well, if I'm hiring an editor, I'm paying someone to do this. I do not need to take the time to revise my work. And I disagree with that very strongly.
Oh, I do too.
Because yeah, and the best, if my client, if an editing client of mine sends me a manuscript and they have spent lots of time revising it on their own, I'm going to be able to give them much better value because I won't be stuck on all the things they fixed before. We'll be able to take it to another level. So I think it's so important to put in the time revising. I actually have a course for fiction authors about self edits and revising your work. That's on my website. But I think it's so important to put in the time. It takes me way longer to revise than it does to write a first draft because I like to go through it again and again and again.
Tell me about it.
I know it can be overwhelming, but yeah, that would be my biggest advice. So spend the time revising yourself and hire editors.
Right. And the thing about it with me is sometimes I'm in my third revision of my middle grade mystery with some supernatural and some fantasy elements in it.
Okay.
And honestly, I go through it. I'm like, okay, this doesn't need to be changed. This needs these scenes need to be changed into another chapter. And then I'm on a chapter going, wait a minute, I missed something. And I find I'm not satisfied with it. So sometimes that last round of revisions can make you see where you're not satisfied with it. And if you're not going to be satisfied with it, the editor's going to be confused.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the thing. So, okay. Let me ask you a marketing question. Are you planning to put your book on Kindle Unlimited, your ebook?
At this point, it is not on Kindle Unlimited. So my book is basically available online wherever books are sold. So it's not exclusive anywhere. And the reason I decided, and I know it's different for every author, so it really depends on your goals, your process. But the reason I did that for my story is that I also want to have the ability to sell it directly. All of it. I want to be able to sell the print book, the ebook, the audiobook all directly if I choose to. And I also pre-launched the book through Kickstarter. So I did a Kickstarter campaign back in June and July to do to sell early copies. And I plan to launch book 2 also through Kickstarter before it goes up on Amazon and other retailers. And because of that, I want those ebooks to be in my control. I don't want them to be exclusive anywhere. So that's why I personally decided not to do KU.
Okay. And that's the reason I'm asking, because I've seen, I don't know if you've seen, all these books, but there are a lot of middle grade authors self-published authors who use Kindle Unlimited.
And
So
I know a lot of authors do really well on KU. So it's a tricky decision to make. So I think it really comes down to, okay, like what is my business plan as an author? What do I foresee for my books? And experimentation too,
because
trying
I was
different
going to
things.
test the waters. I mean, I may not
Yeah.
keep it there a lot,
Yeah.
I may not keep it there forever, but at least do like the first 90 days or maybe the first year on
Yeah.
KU, and then
I've
see
heard of a lot of people who do that, kind of like, start there and then move out of it and see how it goes.
Yeah, because I think that'll give me an idea of what
Yeah.
because I've heard it's so hard to market middle grade. I'm like, oh boy.
Yeah, the challenge with middle grade is you're not marketing to the reader directly. You're marketing to their parents, their grandparents, their teachers.
Right.
So it is a different kind of approach. And I
Right.
agree that it is a challenge.
Yeah, it is. But there are a lot of middle grade imprints that are closing from what my publisher friend says. But I'm gonna test it. That's why I'm talking to people like you to kind of get the consensus on this, because I see this and I'm like, because I read Kindle Unlimited, I pay for Kindle Unlimited because instead of buying all these books, I can read them and return them.
Yeah. Well, and I will say one thing that is different with Kidlit in general. And I mean, there are still going to be some ebook sales, but most kids like print books. And so while a lot of independent authors make most of their sales through ebook, the majority of middle grade authors that I have talked to would move primarily print books. So with your ebook, maybe it's not as big of a decision, or it's not, your whole business isn't riding on what you do with your ebooks, because a lot of people are probably going to go for the print book, especially if they're giving it to a kid for Christmas or giving it to them to read. Yeah.
Yeah, and I definitely want to. I've got a friend who said she would help me do Ingram Spark. I do want to do the print book so I can get it in libraries, but I think I'm gonna go ebook. I'm gonna go Kindle Unlimited first, and then see where that goes. Because I've seen that, like, I think I've got like 10 books that way now. So
Okay. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I know that's why I wanted to pick your brain about it, because I think I'm going to test the waters. And for those listening and watching, I will let you know what happened. Once I get the book ready to publish, I will let you know how that goes. So, but yeah, I appreciate your insight on that.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I'm excited to hear how it goes for you.
yeah, I will let you know. So, where can people find you online?
I am online at Beca Wierwille, so my name.com. Wierwille is WIERWILLE. I know that's a lot to remember, so you can also go to my publisher name, to belovedchronicles.com, and that will take you to my website. There's a book page on my website for Road Trip Rescue, and from there, there's links to a lot of the online retailers, but really you can find Road Trip Rescue on Amazon, online, most places books are sold. And also, I will say I have an email list, so you can sign up from my website to my newsletter, and the short stories that Anne was talking about are on there. So if you want to find me there.
Yep. I love it. I signed up.
Well, thank you.
Yep. So, okay. So, do you have, and I asked this with the Christian-based authors, but do you have a Bible verse you'd like to share before we close out?
That's a great question. Well, the Bible verse that I have in the front of Road Trip Rescue. So the epigraph, is it an epigraph? Whatever you put in the front. It's Matthew, I think it's 28:20. I think I don't have it in front of me. But it's where Jesus is about to ascend to heaven, and he tells his followers, "And surely I am with you always to the end of the age." And
Oh, yeah, that's right.
yeah, when I started writing Road Trip Rescue, I didn't have that verse in mind, but as I wrote Kimmy's journey, that was really the message that was coming through to me. And I want everyone listening to know and be reminded that even when you feel alone, even when you walk into a room and it feels like you're different, or no one sees you, you're not alone, because God's with you. And even when we pray and we might think, well, God's not answering my prayers, he's not listening to me. Well, he is listening. He does hear us. And sometimes he doesn't answer prayers in the way we want him to, but he is with us and he does hear us. And so that's something that I'd love to leave listeners with.
Wow. Okay. So, is there anything else that God has put on your heart before we close that you'd like to say?
Well, I know that we had talked a little bit about advice, and I had shared advice as an editor from the author side of things. I would mention that, and this kind of goes into the verse too. As an author, I think it's easy to think, okay, well, here I am sitting in my office at my desk on my computer, typing out this story on my own. But I think I think God's really remind writing is not a solitary venture. We are not meant to do life on our own, and we're not meant to just write on our own. And so inviting people into your process, I mean, there are so many people who read Road Trip Rescue before it was published and who gave me such valuable feedback and who helped make the story what it is and who are helping me get it into the world. And so inviting other people into your process and inviting God into your process, I think is so important. So yeah, we're not meant to do life, writing, any of it on our own.
Wow, and I love that. So, and that, that's why I am a part of the 540 writers community, because we do write-ins. I mean, we have workshops on Thursday nights, but we also do write-ins. There's write-ins every day, and I host one on Tuesday nights. And soon, our president Becky Antkowiak is going to put together a write-in room, so we can just go in there and not have to write alone. And that's
Yeah.
that really that accountability. You kind of get used to that, and so
Mm-hmm.
it's hard for me to write by myself anymore.
Yeah, yeah, I've been part of communities that do that. It is wonderful to be able to write with others.
Yep.
And if there's a local writers group, that's also fun. I know some places have groups that go and we'll meet at a coffee shop and we'll write together for an hour or so. Also, I mean, I don't know when this interview is going to air, but right now we're at the end of October. So November is on the horizon, NaNoWriMo. That's a
Yes.
really great opportunity to be able to write in community with other authors. I have done Goodness, I don't know how many years I've done NaNoWriMo now. A lot. I will not be doing it next month just because I can't. I have a book launching. I have an editing project next week. I have book 2 due to my editor. I have a daughter. So it's just not going to happen next month. However, if you are even just like having this idea of a story in your head that you want to write about, I highly recommend NaNoWriMo, because even to have that online community and that accountability and to be able to go online and be like, okay, I logged this many words. And even if your goal isn't is it 40,000 words? Is that the goal for NaNo?
50,000.
50,000. So even if your goal isn't 50,000 words, that's totally fine. I mean, if you're writing middle grade, you might not even have a story that's a full 50,000 words.
Right.
My story is around like 45,000, I think, Road Trip Rescue. But it's just a great opportunity to be able to write in community and be part of something where, writers all over the world are doing it too.
Right. And I'm going to tell you, I've been doing it since 2014. And you got the camp sessions in April and July. If you can't do the monthly, the November, the whole NaNoWriMo thing in November. But I wasn't going to do it, but God showed me a method that, because I'm in the revision stage and I'm not ready for to do book 2
Okay.
of my series yet. But he said,
Yeah.
and I looked and I verified this, but 50,000 words, 1,000 words in an hour is on average what they say a writer can write.
Mm-hmm.
Pro writing aid says a writer can write. So, and the guy said, why don't you do that? 1,000 words an hour. And if you do that way, you can do it. That way, you can in your head do 50 hour work 50 hours on your revisions every month and still count the hour as 1,000 words. And I'm like, that makes sense, because I was gonna not do it because I was revising, didn't know how to do it. But now I actually have a method that I can use, because it's still, even if I don't do a lot with the forums, it's still exciting to do that NaNoWriMo, that whole challenge. It's like November is just like this.
Oh no.
Oops. Okay, now back to what I was
Okay,
saying. I don't
awesome.
know. That was kind of weird. Okay, sorry about that, y'all. But yeah, what I was saying was, even though I'm not doing draft, I'm revising, because that is that energy, that's that time, that's that season that fuels me.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely does create an energy to be doing it with other people. It's
Right. Uh-oh. People, we are having some technical issues. Like, uh-oh. Sorry if you're hearing Jaws, but somehow we have lost connection, and if she does come back, I will have her pray us out. Becca, are you there?
I am here.
There
Sorry
you
about
are.
the
Okay.
technical issues.
Yeah,
I'm not sure
that's
what's
fine.
going on.
I don't know if it's my internet or yours. It's really, I don't know if the enemy is trying to attack us or not, but we're going to pray that out. We're not going to have that. And Satan, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. Get thee behind us. So, what were you going to say before you got cut off?
I was just saying, I agree. I think NaNoWriMo is a great time to have the energy to dive into writing, revising. It's very motivating and encouraging to be doing it with other writers.
Right, it is. So, would you like to close us out in prayer? Would you do me the honor?
I would love to. Yeah. All right. Dear Jesus, thank you so much for this time that Anne and I could have together to talk. I pray for everyone listening today that they would know that you have created them wonderfully for a unique purpose and for the adventures you have in store for them. And God, that they will be reminded today that they are not alone, that you are with them even right now, and that you hear them when they talk to you, and that you will never leave them. God, thank you for giving us gifts to write and to glorify you with our words and other gifts too, Lord. Thank you for your goodness in our lives. And I pray that you would walk with each of us as we go from here today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. And so we challenge you today to go out there and read to get inspired, write something inspiring, and share your creation with the world. For when you've touched one life, you've touched thousands. Thanks for joining us on Inspirational Journeys today. And remember, your story matters. Have a blessed day, everybody.